All right, class, we're back to Algebra 1B boot camp. Today we're talking about exponents and radicals. Whenever we're discussing properties of exponents, we're dealing with situations in which we are multiplying variables that have powers. Whenever we are multiplying numbers with the same pace, we add the exponents together. Remember, technically, this is 2x's and 3x's, so it's 5x's total, or 2 plus 3. In a more complicated problem like this one, we have 5x's here and 2x's there, which makes 7x's total. For the y's, we have 3 and 6. 3 plus 6 is 9. And for our big numbers, the 2 and the 3, we just multiply them. 2 times 3 is 6. When we have a power to a power situation like this, we think of it as x squared times x squared times x squared. And so we have 2, 4, 6 total x's. We're technically just multiplying the powers together. The same thing over here. We can multiply the 5 and the 4 together because they're both powers and say 3 to the 20th. We would also technically multiply 5 times 1 as the power of that x is 1 and say x to the 5th. We could evaluate 3 to the 20th if we want, but that's a very large number. Whenever we have a power on the outside, the power just gets distributed to each individual number. So the 3 will go with the x and with the x to the 4, or y to the 4th. So the x just becomes x to the 3rd. The y to the 4th is y to the 4th to the 3rd power. So you end up multiplying those two together. So you would say y to the 12th. Here, even though we have a fraction, this 3 has to go to 4 different things. We have to say 2 to the 3rd. We would say x to the 5th to the 3rd, which is x to the 15th. We multiply 5 and 3. Y to the 3rd. And then z to the 4th to the 3rd, which is z to the 12th. Whenever we have a negative exponent, typically they make fractions. So this is x to the negative 1. This is the same thing as saying 1 over x. You just jump it down to the bottom. In the past, we've talked about them being sad numbers. This number is in the bottom and it's negative, so it jumps up to the top. So it's 3x to the 4th. And we have a 1 in the bottom, or technically we don't have to write a bottom at all. Anything that has a 0 power is 1. So 5 to the 0 is just 1. You could put that in your calculator and it would evaluate it for you. Over here, 3 times x to the 0, well, that's just 3 times 1, because anything to the 0 power is 1. So my answer here is 3. And then whenever we are dividing numbers with powers, we subtract. Technically, what is happening is we have 5x's on top and 7x's on bottom. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So cancel, 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 and I'm left with 2. So 1 over x squared. For the next one, there are several different ways you can do it. I like to make that number become a happy number by jumping it up to the top. And I would say 5x squared times x to the 5th, technically over 1. X squared next to the 5th, well, that's 2x's and 5x's, which makes 7x's. The last topic we need to talk about is rational exponents. And technically, if we have a radical, we can always write it as a fractional exponent. It's the same thing, it's just a different way of writing it. So for this situation here, the number that's the power is on the top of the fraction. The number that's in the root goes on the bottom. So I could rewrite this as an exponent and say 5 over 2. Here, I could do the opposite. It wants me to rewrite the expression as a radical. So my 3 is my power and my 2 is my root. So that would be the square root of 5 to the third power. For this next one, it wants me to actually physically evaluate. So my 3 is my power and my 2 is my root. So this is the square root of 81 to the third. You could do this two ways. You could take 81 and raise it to the third power, or the easier thing to do is to square root 81, which is 9, and then take 9 to the third power. And your calculator can evaluate that at 729. For the next one, we have, this time it's a third root of negative 27 to the fourth power. Well, the third root of negative 27 is just negative 3. And then I take negative 3 to the fourth power. If you're going to put that in your calculator, make sure you put negative 3 in parentheses, because negative 3 multiplied 4 times ends up giving you a positive number of 81.